Welcome to Retired. Hello, I'm Sue Britz. This episode is the first in a special limited series entitled Moving On. The concept of our podcast, Retired, is about having new identities, and there's no doubt that death affects and changes who we are in profound ways. Those effects alter our identities, and we are left having to figure out the impacts on who we are. The death of a parent impacts us in a way that changes our own personal reality. If we didn't have to deal with a parent's death when we were younger, then doing so as a person of retirement age is a common loss we have to process. While parent relationships are complicated, many of us feel a deep emptiness with the loss of our cherished advisor, teacher, nurturer, friend, protector, and so much more. This brings me to new territory, one that created the reason for this first episode, entitled Moving On. My dad died early this summer, and I'm processing the experience, his loss, what I'm learning about him and myself, knowing that without him, I am forever changed. I'm not even sure how I want to start this, but I do know it's something I want to share and something I want to save for myself, I think. It's about learning and understanding and experiencing life, even the hard stuff, the very hard stuff, the hardest stuff. I went to go see my dad about a month before he died, and he was moving from independent living to assisted living. He knew that he needed care. He found out not that long ago, maybe 8 months before, that he had a kidney cancer. He had taken 2 treatments of immunotherapy that didn't really produce anything positive. He was just very tired, and so it was time to get that additional help from assisted living. When I moved him over there, one of the other things I wanted to help him with was getting into hospice. For my dad, it was, if you're in hospice, you've given up the fight. You're done with living. And for me, I felt I needed to help him understand that it was more of a fight for quality of life and what you want your end of life to look like. So before he would even discuss those issues, he needed to hear directly from his doctor that, in fact, there was no more treatment to be had. It was quite difficult getting the doctor to tell him that. He needed to hear the words directly from his oncologist himself. It was very difficult to arrange for all of this to happen relatively quickly. But I guess what happens is when you sign up for hospice, the doctor has to sign off on it. So when we're sending these messages to him, please, discuss this with my father so that he can hear directly from you and accept his need for hospice, he finally responded. And my dad heard the direct words from the doctor that there were no more treatments. I will say this, it took a lot to get direct conversation, direct communication, to hear those words. Our society doesn't address the elephant in the room, the topic of death. It's so taboo, and it's not helpful for people who have their entire lives avoided that conversation, because this is the one thing that we all know will happen to us, and it's the one thing that kind of universally I think people are afraid of. It happens every day, and yet we don't talk about it, and we can help each other through this process. We need to talk about it. The move itself was quite the adventure. Thankfully, I had my sisters and niece, nephew, they were able to help out. My dad had downsized over the years multiple times, but he still had so many things. Living in Arizona, he still had winter clothes that he couldn't part with, that they were still useful for someone else. He had stacks of papers that he wanted to go through each sheet of paper and determine whether it was going to be recycled, shred, or a resource to be given to somebody. So this went on, and I felt myself kind of impatient finally at some point when each piece of paper had to be looked at and discussed, thinking that nothing's ever going to get done. We can't do this in this short period of time. But then I started just listening, because I understood that each of the items represented so much for my dad. It represented his old life, his life with mom, with us kids. It represented his independence, his strengths as a professional engineer. All these things, each of these items represented that. And so they were imbued with this sacredness of memory. And I understood that. During that move, we stayed in Dad's one-bedroom apartment until everything was moved over to assisted living. And I was staying on the sofa bed that I always used when I went to visit Mom and Dad. Dad was having a hard time sleeping in his bed. I suspected, I knew he was in pain that he wouldn't admit. He said he was uncomfortable, but he couldn't get comfortable laying down, and he was in pain. So even after trying to sleep at night in his bed, he would come over to the recliner in the family room. And of course, I would hear him, and I was laying there on that sofa bed, and we would just talk. He was talking all day long too, but the talking at night took on a different feel. It was so quiet and intimate. The topics mostly were about his recollections, about his memories, about his life. One night he came over to the recliner and sat down, and he said, "I woke up in a panic." He had never used those words before. His mind was just racing, daytime, nighttime, and I can only imagine. He told me he felt panicked, and I'm starting to understand more this mania that he had to share and say everything and try to put everything in order before it was too late. So I wanted to share some of the recordings that we made during that time. Right after that panic, what came to his mind were memories of childhood. And so we'll start there. Do you remember yourself being a storyteller all the time?
Oh, I don't think so. Just since I'm getting older. It's nice to remember what we used to like to do as kids. You'd go down the stairs to the front porch, and there was a covered front porch, and they had rocking chairs, which were a novelty for us. So Bev and I would sit in the rocking chairs and rock. At the end of the street, about 3 houses down, was a tiny little grocery store, what was called a red and white in those days, that people could get in the grocery business and have a red and white store. But it was they sold basic groceries and stuff like that, but they also sold candy, penny candy and stuff like that. So we'd take a trip down there and take a look. times. And you could walk from Grandma Davis to Grandma Britz's house. And on the way, there was a guy who had a bunch of Doberman pincers. Thank goodness they were behind the fence because they scared the crap out of us as you'd walk by. Grandma Davis, he bought this house on Gimble Avenue, and it was like a two-family house. Grandma and Grandpa lived on the top floor, and then they rented the unit below, so they were getting nice income. So when Grandpa died, Grandma was pretty good, but she was by herself, and her sister Ida came to live with her. No, Aunt Ida would be, I kid you not, probably somewhere between 4 and 4.5 feet tall. Mm-hmm. A little old lady. And Bev and I used to say to her, "Nighty nighty, Auntie Heidi."
It was interesting to me to just like listen to Dad and hear what was on his mind, what drove him to that panic, and then what gave him comfort as he woke up and started talking. I love they said it's nice to remember. It is. It's very nice to remember those details, and some of which we hadn't even heard before. Good times, he's remembering those good times, and that would give him some comfort, some chance to redirect the panic into remembering nice things. I loved hearing my dad remembering a childhood memory that he shared with his sister where he was silly and playful. That's one of the characteristics I really love about my dad. And, he passed that on to me, and I passed that on to my kid. That idea of legacy, of passing things on, something else I learned from Dad. In the years after he retired, he spent a lot of time with projects like family ancestry, and he did lots of other things too, but he'd always come back to wanting to preserve things that were important, to pass them on. And that was one of the things that he thought of when he woke up from that panic. He must have been trying to preserve more of that legacy, preserve his family history, and maybe tell who he was, who he came from. So Dad woke up from that panic nightmare, and one of the things that he started talking about was his grandpa, his grandfather, Joel Davis, who had emigrated to the United States. This is a little of his story.
And I'm not too sure how he entered the country. It might have been through Canada, I don't know. But, yeah. What a strong will to take that into your own. And he left his family.
Yeah.
Never saw him again. But he worked to improve himself. He eventually got a job on the Lehigh Valley Railroad. And the Buffalo connection comes in because it ran from New York City to Buffalo. And And he used to be on the express train, nonstop. And they had the famous locomotive called the Black Diamond. And I guess running at a speed of 45 miles an hour was considered really fast, and he had eventually a job as a conductor. He had a Waltham watch that he used for timing. Being a conductor, he had to be aware of time and such. Now, Leonard has Grandpa Davis's Waltham watch, and I put, historical information in the back of it so that there's a history that people know this.
I stayed with Dad for about a week during that move, and this was kind of what it was like each night. There was a lot of napping during the day, of course, but at night he was uncomfortable, and he just couldn't admit to being in pain. He finally accepted taking Tylenol around the clock. He refused to take anything stronger than that, and so it was evident he had pain. And at night he'd spend maybe an hour or an hour and a half rustling around in that bed trying to get comfortable, and he could never get comfortable. So that recliner became the place that he could settle and rest and maybe get some sleep. But we spent hours just talking and listening to each other. But more often than not, we would just lay awake and he'd talk. And soon the talk turned to his jobs, his career. I think my dad was one of these men, certainly of his generation, that identified a lot by his career, by his profession. He was an electrical engineer. And Dad did switch jobs fairly often. Ask me when they find out all the different places that I lived as a kid, was your dad in the military? No, he was just looking for the next fun job, the job that was intriguing to him, that kept his career moving forward, and certainly improved his financial situation so that he could provide for his family. That was definitely something that he cared deeply about. The values of finding work that is intriguing and grows you, and providing for your family certainly were not things. Certainly were known values that our dad taught us. But, listening to these conversations at night, I got to hear a little more stuff. It was like talking adult to adult, and knowing that he was reminiscing on his life, talking about what was important to him. I got to hear stuff that I hadn't heard before. And, I heard about how he was working on the cutting edges of technology often, especially as they moved from job to job. In this section, you're going to hear a bit about that movement into new technologies and programming and design. And then you'll hear about how he developed this intuition about when it was the right time to move on to the next job.
Checking around with these different outfits, and they decided that they would probably go with 3M, and now it would require a different language, but that was okay. I got my training on that, and they were thinking of buying a machine from 3M. I think they had, at the time transistors were just coming in, so 3M didn't rely so much on vacuum tubes as it was solid state stuff. And so they said, we would like a program that would design transformers, power transformers. So I had to sit down with the power transformer designers and go through their processes of creating a design. And then I started working on the program. I still have I got it down on paper in my book. The basic steps that would be made to make a program. And about that time, a headhunter contacted me and was I interested in a job for a company in Guelph called Hammond. And I took the interview, and it was, wow, a terrific job. And they threw a salary at me that was head and shoulders above what I was making. And I was giving it serious consideration. Talked it over with Mom. We had been in Scarborough with English Electric there close to 5 years. And I can remember at the same time, things weren't going too well at English Electric, and we weren't getting the business. And I could see that things were slowing down. There was no two ways about it. And I went ahead and took the job at Hammond. And when I gave them a 2-week notice, and they said, "Oh, Len, where's your company loyalty?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I certainly enjoyed working here, but when an opportunity comes along like this, I'd be a fool to pass it up." And I made my apologies, but I stayed on for the 2 weeks and left. And you know, it wasn't more than 6 months after I left, they closed the plant.
Wow.
Yeah. But it turns out it's like, whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hammond was really great because I was kind of spread into other parts of electrical engineering, and they made a huge variety of product. And so that was a new experience for me, learning experience. And then wouldn't you know it, another headhunter contacted me. And they said, "There's a company in the States looking for your talent. Would you like to take the interview?" Of course, that was Pittsburgh with Alice Chalmers. And they had a magnificent operation in Pittsburgh for transformers and rotating equipment. Very much like English Electric in that regard. And they had some terrific advantages being in Pittsburgh. The facility was really marvelous. So I joined them. And wouldn't you know, the very week that I started to work for them, the company went on strike. And you had to cross the picket lines to go into work. Engineering was still, operating, but the rest of the plant was essentially closed down. And that was kind of curious. Eventually, they got back to work, but there was trouble brewing on that company real quick. So there was organizers trying to get the company in Pittsburgh switched over to the automotive unions. And eventually that's what did them in. We had set up a task force, and West Dallas came and they said, "We want you to do a survey of what we can do in expanding our business into higher voltage in particular. And we put together a really comprehensive program and worked up the dollars and cents to make these improvements. And it would be peanuts, pocket change for a company like Alice Chalmers. The boys from Los Alamos came in on one day, and we each got our turn to stand up and give them our presentation. And we had prepared charts and everything, so it was done pretty slick. When all of a sudden done, the boys went back to West Dallas. We continued on working. A couple of weeks later, I talked to my boss. I said, whatever happened to those people that came over and us task force people gave the presentation to? Was there any problem? They said no, they were impressed. They thought everybody did a great job and it was very convincing. But they decided they're going to put the whole thing on back burner. Holy moly. How could they possibly pass that up? Because, like I say, the cost of making these changes to make the advance in our business was pocket change. So, about that time, one of the guys in the drafting department, he said, did you guys see the ad in the Pittsburgh paper? They're advertising for electrical engineers. And the plant is in Florida. Sounded interesting. I called him, and man, oh man, Dave just jumped right in there. He says, "Oh, I'll send you tickets. Come on down. We'll do the interview." Oh man, he's very persuasive, to say the least. He needed somebody for design work, for transformers and the like. Well, we were only really transformers, didn't have anything else. And he sure put a rush on getting me to join him. Again, a really, really nice salary increase. And again, all the moves and blah, blah, blah. And so I told them I'm going to leave in 2 weeks, and they weren't too happy about that. But in the meantime, that magnificent facility in Pittsburgh was still, they weren't doing anything because of their labor problems. And so they moved us down to Florida, and we bought a house pretty quick. Nice house. I think you can remember it.
Absolutely.
And, again, it was just a very short time later, they closed the plant in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
It was like, whew, just in time.
As I think about it now, I realize how bold and adventurous my dad was. He emigrated to the United States. He uprooted his wife and 4 children and looked for new opportunity. It seems that he had a knack for figuring out when it was the right time to make that move, too. His new job not only offered the financial movement forward that he needed for his family, but also for his own creative and growth within his profession. It harkens back to his grandfather, Joel, who made the decision to emigrate to the United States from Wales. It's kind of interesting to think that was what was on his mind, perhaps, without stating it that way, as he went through his journey in his career. His dad talked during the days when were sitting around taking naps or in the evenings, he would talk and talk. It was like he couldn't stop talking. And we were talking about that, and he said, it's like I can't sleep. And so I just start either talking out loud or thinking about how to do all the different projects. I will design another transformer, or I review how this was utilized in my career, or go back over and think about all the details. And sure enough, that's what he was doing when I was there with him, and he was talking out loud. And he'd go into such detail. He knew every person's name. He didn't have to pull that out of a memory. It was there. And he's talking about all the details of his work. And, I guess one could say that could be very boring listening to a bunch of engineer talk. But just to hear his train of thought and where it went and what details he included, and it went down to minutia, the details. And it was just an amazing thing to sit and observe the way my dad thought. Along with observing how my dad's mind worked and what he was thinking about, I knew a lot of it also was how to distract himself from what was happening and his reluctance to talk about that. So instead he focused on these memories and the details. The details included the fact that, he was at the top of his game and was able to accomplish things, because in his current state, Dad was really just kind of frustrated and disbelieving that he couldn't do the things that he was able to do even a month or so ago. You'll notice that it's harder for him to talk physically. That's part of the progression of what he was going through. But in this section, he talks about his work at Ontario Hydro. That's up in Niagara Falls. And they were switching the frequency from 25 to 60 volts. It was both in residential as well as commercial areas. And this was at the beginning of Dad's career. And in fact, he was a young man, unmarried. And it was clearly a time of self-discovery, because this is when he started changing his thoughts about getting an education, finishing degrees, and going to school, and how he saw himself as a student. So here, I'll share this part with you.
So they were looking for people with technical engineering, the whole 9 yards. And the guy that ran the project, his name was Sandy Bazell. He was a retired colonel from the Army, and he had been in the Corps, the group that did engineering for the Army. And so he set the thing up just like you would have as a military group, very organized, Turned out to be fantastic, because in the Niagara region there was a lot of industry, primarily because, the power source from the generation scheme in Niagara Falls provided a good source of energy, so a lot of fairly large companies were situated there. So I got to work. The idea was that you had to have a survey team to go in and approach the company and tell them what the project's going to be, and arrange for a complete inventory of all of their equipment that's going to have to be changed over. And of course, the majority of it was transformers and motors. Anything that was connected that way, they were all frequency impacted. So by changing from 25 to 60, all that equipment had to be changed. ultimately, when the time came that they were going to make the change, everything was stockpiled and ready for the change, because they would do the change as quickly as possible in order to not shut anybody down. And they had temporary means of being able to do it in pieces if you had to, because it was so big. But that was a fantastic job. Really, really great. The pay was fantastic. And I had a expense account because I used my own car and stuff like that. I used to get accommodation based on what was available. I would look in the paper and find somebody who had a room for rent. Or sometimes I used to stay in a motel, especially in the wintertime. Motels had very few customers because of the weather. But in the summertime, you couldn't stay in a motel. But so I'd put in a full day's work, quit at 5. There was one restaurant, they always had a noon special, and I said, would you mind holding back one of those for me at dinner time? And they did, and it was, like $1.95 or something like that. So I'd have a quick dinner, and then I'd beetle over to Buffalo to go to night school. And let's see, the classes usually started at about 7 o'clock and went to, I don't know, as late as 9:30. So and I would get like 1 or 2 courses a semester, like either 1 4-hour course or 2 3-hour courses. So I nibbled away at finishing the job, but it was surprising. My attitude towards school was entirely different, and I did quite well. I eventually got on the dean's list. In the meantime, as I said, they would march through the region, section by section by section, making these changes over, and the group they would have like duplicate lines. One which fed the old 25 hertz, and the new ones that fed 60. And on the day of what they call the cut date, everybody had swarmed into that one area. It was massive. I mean, sometimes you couldn't get down the street. It was so jammed up with stuff, especially in the residential, because they would do like maybe 200 homes in one shot. And so they'd shut down the power and go in there and make the changes. And then when everybody was double checked down the line, all set to go, re-energize it when you go. That was done. But I had to be there for each and every one of those aside, because I was coordinating for Ontario Hydro. And some of them was fantastic. Industries. There's one in Port Colborne, which is at the very end of Lake Erie on the Canadian side. And the grain ships would come down, and rather than try to go through the well, some of them couldn't go through the Welland Canal, but some of them, by choice, I guess, dumped their grain at a facility in Port Colborne, and it was these huge silos. Well, dust was always a problem, so all the equipment in that facility had to be explosion proof. If a motor overloaded and was burnt out, it could not expel any heat or flame such that it would ignite the dust. And everything had to be grounded so you wouldn't get static flashover that would create ignition for the dust. And a lot of the equipment was, the motorized equipment, which was frequency sensitive, was at the top of the silos because they had these conveyor belts to move the grain and such. And they turned the grain into flour at that mill. Well, had to go up to the top, and they had what was called a Humphrey man lift, and it was nothing more than a continuous belt. The belt was about that wide, and it would run up to the very top and then come back down again, and constantly moving. Well, as it would come up through an opening in the floor, which was about maybe 3 feet, 4 feet in diameter, and up would come a little platform that you could step on. The platform was only about that wide, about that deep, and then above it was a handhold. And so as it came up, you had to step on, grab hold of the thing, and away you went. And then when you came to the appropriate floor, you had to step off at the appropriate time, not too early and not too late. Otherwise, you're going to stumble and fall, or you're going to get jammed up. And that was scary as hell.
I'd like to share another story of Dad's. And this one is about being on the cutting edge of technology, which is really interesting to me. I keep hearing this as a reoccurring theme in a lot of things that Dad told me about. And it kind of doesn't match with the person that I knew in real life. My dad was one of these guys who I always thought was like a Luddite. He refused to have internet. When he did finally get internet, it was dial-up, and he used that from the time that dial-up was the standard until just recent years. He was using dial-up, and I couldn't even imagine it. As we were changing his apartment from independent living to assisted, he wanted a landline, and why, Dad? Well, just because it makes sense. I don't know. It was hard for him to go with the flow. He really resisted also a smartphone. He refused to ever buy internet after that, and would only use the wireless when there was a hotspot or some other wireless service available to him. He was also the kind of guy who had an antenna, the bunny ears. And he's like, well, I'm not paying for TV. I'm only going to watch the stuff that comes over the bunny ears. So that's what he did. He did that, and he had his beta and VHS along with CDs. And when his VHS machine stopped working, he went up to the thrift store to look for one. Couldn't find one there. They were still selling them in Walmart. He bought I think he said, he was so proud. He said it was like $15 for this VHS player. And that's what he would use. He had a big collection of VHS and CD movies, and that's what we watched together too. And all those nights we'd watch some old TV shows and old movies from his library of VHSs and CDs. So anyhow, this goes back to being on the cutting edge, where he's actually back in those days writing some of the first programs for computers. Now, mind you, these computers are the size of a full room at the time. So it was a whole different ball game, kiddos, than it is now.
Ferranti Packard have a Ferranti calculator computer, and we've arranged to rent time to create a program to do these calculations, and we want you to go over there, meet so-and-so, and he's going to teach you how to use the computer to do these calculations. Then we want you to put together the program, and we'll just see how far we can go with this. So we had to rent time on the computer, but Ferranti Packard were a competitor, but they cooperated. I guess English Electric had enough pull with these companies that they could get the cooperation. So I went over there, and the guy put me through the basics, and in those days they didn't have programs like we have today. They had one that was called AutoMath, and that's the one that you could use in it. And so you had to write the statements and enter it on a device that looked like, for all the world, like a typewriter, and it in turn produced a tape, 5-channel tape that would be fed into the computer, and then the results would come out on another tape. And so this guy that was training, he said, I'll challenge you to write the program, and then I'll look at it and I'll see if I can reduce the program by even one line of input, because this machine was so limited in its computing power that anything you could save could eliminate any unnecessary steps, would improve the program. So we had kind of a back and forth. Finally whittled it down to the best program possible. Did a couple of computation runs, and then take the same data and manually do the calculations and compare the results. And finally got results that matched. So I said, okay, we want to go ahead and produce this program in such a way that the user won't have to use the machine, because that just wasn't possible to, each time they needed to do a calculation, run over and run the machine. So they said, we want to produce a text of variables on these dimensions, and they would be logical and in terms of the order. And then we would do a calculation for one set of data, then incrementally change one dimension and run the data, and do that for all possible configurations of the rotor slots. And we knew what those were like. So we sat down and we computed, or made a guesstimate, that in order to run this program, it was going to take close to 24 hours, taking into account the speed of the machine, which by the way, it didn't have any transistors, it only had vacuum tubes. And the computer itself was about the size of a diesel electric locomotive. It was about that wide, about that tall, and about that long. And they had it in a clean room, and you had to go through a airlock. And in the early days, they used to make you wear a hat and boots, so as you didn't just bring in any dust, because a lot of the operating devices were little switches, which if they got contaminated would be bad. They had a crew in there working during the whole day, and they would open up the side door and pull out it was a printed circuit board. One printed circuit board would represent one byte of information, and it had vacuum tubes on it, and they were constantly changing out tubes, fixing it to keep it. So Franny Packard were reluctant to give us any time other than on the weekend. They said, well, it'll be free on the weekend. So I set it up, went in the morning, planned to go 24 hours of the damn thing. And I went ahead, started the machine, the program. And of course the tape, clickety click. Once I did it, then the machine did this whole thing. And eventually data was coming out. And the tape coming out, we would put into a large basket. It just kept feeding into the basket. And every once in a while you had to replenish the tape reel. So you had to pause the program, put on a new reel, and let her go. And it splice it to the previous one. And then we had offline teletype. They're made by teletype printers. You'd feed the start end into the computer, and it would type out this information. And I can remember Joel and Jackie lived out that end of town. They came over, and I let them in so they could see what was going on. As it turned out, it didn't take 24 hours. It was, I can't remember how many, but it was somewhat less, maybe like 16 or so. And in the end, we were able to publish a book. It was like, I don't know, I'm going to say about 100 pages. And then they turned it over to Rotating Equipment Boys. And from then on, they could use that book to do that calculation. It was all done for them. And they reckoned that it represented 25 man-years of engineering. Now I think, well, that machine is putting guys out of business maybe. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it saved them the drudgery of doing this one calculation. But overall for the company, it proved tremendously valuable because they could get the job done a hell of a lot quicker. So that was one of the jobs I worked on in R&D.
As we were wrapping up the move from independent to assisted living, we would take some breaks during the day, and Dad would rest and have a little vanilla ice cream. And it prompted a memory, an early childhood memory he had that occurred during World War II. And it ends with a little story about him as a newspaper carrier boy. You'll see where the ice cream comes into play.
The newspapers, it was a nightly newspaper, would always give you the horrible news about taking France, taking Poland, and there'd be vivid pictures. I would be like 7 years old, I said to my dad, if the Nazis come here, will the police defend us? Because here I am thinking about these poor people, it could happen to us. What are we going to do? And in my childish mind, I thought, oh, well, the police are the authorities. What a silly question, but our house at the time was out in the suburbs. And down at the corner of Avenue Road and Roselawn was our street, on the southeast corner was the Toronto Hunt Club, kind of a ritzy place for rich people. They boarded their horses there. But behind our property, all the way down to Avenue Road, there's what they called the bridle path. And the bridle path was like an easement, I'd say maybe 12 feet wide. It was just not paved or anything, just soil, but smooth. And they'd assemble all the horses and the dogs and all that. They'd cross Avenue Road, the cops would come and stop the traffic. And they'd come down the bridle path, and they would be at not a gallop, but trot. And the dogs are out in front, rah, 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 they're all excited. And if we went to the end of our property, there's a fence all the way around it. You could see these people zipping on by. It was kind of fun to see them. And they'd go out to fields. But when World War II started for us in '39, it became a wartime posture. And I think maybe civil rights were restricted. I can't remember. I wouldn't have known that detail. Government came in and took over the Hunt Club and made it an Air Force training facility for officers and non-coms. So, no more Toronto Hunt Club. There was a shortage of metal. And de Havilland in England created this plane called the Mosquito. And it was made out of plywood. Amazing. Formed, of course. Not like you'd buy sheets, but they were actually formed. And the beautiful thing about it was a very strong aircraft and very fast. It had 2 Rolls-Royce engines in it. So it was considered a fighter jet bomber. And they had the fuselage of one of those planes at the base. I think it was probably 1940 or so that I got a paper route. And the paper route started down on Yonge Street, came all the way up Roselawn to Abbey Road. There was quite a climb and, I don't know, probably like a 60-foot elevation change coming up that road. But I had entire route, and I would end at the Hunt Club, the base, to deliver newspaper. And by this time, I had 110 papers. By this time, I was down to, maybe in the order of a dozen newspapers that had to be delivered in the base. Of course, the whole place was surrounded with fencing and security and all that. Whereas there's probably a couple of places to get in, the pedestrian type entrances on Avenue Road. And so you come in, you had to go through a little small building where these guards, security, and they recognize me. Going to deliver the papers, so they open the bag, look in the bag, yeah, okay, go ahead. And the first main building it came to was the officers' mess. And that had been the grand room for the members. And it was a magnificent building. Grand staircase and all that, very impressive. But there was a guy on duty at a little desk, and you just drop him off there. Hi, bye. Then you walk down to the, they had officers, they had non-coms, and then they had a third one. I forget the ranking, but in succession, drop off. But the last one, which is like they'd be like status of privates and that sort of thing. The facility, but by the time you got to those rooms, it was like difference between night and day when you came in and what you saw at the end. But those guys were really nice. And they had a canteen. And in those days, in civilian life, everything was being rationed. And there was no such thing as candy or ice cream or anything like that. But these guys, being in the military, still could get that stuff. They would allow me to get a little cup of ice cream. So I would get there was Mom, Dad, Bev, Joel was born in, I don't think Joel, so I get 3 of these things, and I put them in my bag, and I'd come back out, see the guys. I had a bike, and pedal on home before it melted. We had ice cream, but I didn't do that all the time. But yeah.
Sweet time. Ice cream. A sweet time. So this moving thing was wrapping up. Moving's always so incredibly stressful for everybody, and it was no different for Dad. Torn between wanting to do things and directing us and what to save and who to give it to, and knowing that each thing, even the sheets of paper and pieces of clothing, and let alone the larger objects, each with significance tied to it, we defaulted to, let's just take it, let's pack it up and we'll deal with it there. And if this is going to give Dad comfort when he looks around, then that's what's the most important thing. I was very grateful to have been there to be able to help with the transition, the physical moving from independent to assisted living, but also to be there to help Dad transition from just beginning to accept the reality of the effects of his kidney cancer and the need to shift his fight to the quality of life that he had left, to be there to help process his fears and to be a guardian of his memories and know more of his inner workings, to see him like I hadn't seen him before. I started this project not knowing how to start it, and I'm discovering things as I go along the way. I know that I want to document what I'm learning with this experience. There's more to be told. Moving On is the first in a special episode series of Retired. Many thanks to my dad and to my siblings and the rest of our families. Moving On is produced by me, Sue Britz. Please check the show notes for additional information. Until next time, we all keep moving on.